Welcome to another Artis Opus video. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to do this bad boy with airbrushing, dry brushing and contrast paints. So welcome to another Artis Opus video. We have Indomnitus and we have some of the best infantry for dry brushing I have ever seen in my life. This guy has been airbrushed, dry brushed, washed with contrast paints and then dry brushed again on edge highlight inner sight, and it looks the bomb. Look at that. Super smooth, super lovely, really interesting. Loads of nice contrast on him. So I'm really pleased with this one. It's turned out extremely well and is probably one of the best models for ever catching that middle ground between putting in a little bit more time and getting a load more end result. So as far as a tabletop army goes, if you had 50 of these troops on the table with some big kind of Terminators, or you've got some proper vehicles or something around them, they would look really good. It's pretty much edge highlighted as far as the dry brushing goes, worked out really well. I think we hit another sweet spot there in terms of kind of the transitions between colours, but it's a really achievable result, and there's nothing here detail work wise apart from painting the insignia on his chest that requires any level of delicacy. So this is one of the most effective ways you could get an amazing army on the table super fast. Let's dive in. Okay, stage one. So I'm actually going to be mixing in a little bit of contrast Leviathan blue with the Nagroth Knight in the base coat. That's just because I want to keep things super deep and super powerful as far as the colour goes. We really want something that is distinctly cool. So I'm putting a couple of drops of that in, like 3 or 4 drops of thinner, and then this is not going to be a precise measurement because we don't have a drop bottle here, a hefty scoop of Nagroth Knight for the base coat. Mix that up, and then we're going to base coat the entire marine. Primarily we're making sure that we get the underside of it. It doesn't matter if we don't get the top because we're going to be covering that with other stuff with the airbrush. So just getting it all over. I've got my airbrush on pressure 1,000,000 here because I just cleaned it, but it doesn't really matter for base coating purposes. So we'll get this all over and then jump back to it. We've done a test, we are good. So with this, you're just looking to, if you've got a lamp above you, one of the tricks that I like to use is I'm just going to hit the areas where the lamp is hitting. So you'll see it coming out of frame, that's me holding it up to the lamp, and then, for example, areas such as the top of the shoulder pads, I'll hit those with some pre-shading, the top of the backpack. And it doesn't matter if this stage isn't particularly precise, you just don't want anything to be too thick or too unsubtle. You're hitting areas that are going to be hit fully with colour anyway. You're not going from below. That's the important thing. So I'm actually going to be putting a couple of drops of Lamy medium into my mix. A couple of scoops, however you'd like to measure this. So 3 of that, 4 of that, 4 Lamy medium, 4 thinner. This is probably a little bit more than is needed, but it helps get a good quality mix if you're not kind of just about sitting around there in the bottom. 1 scoop of McCrag blue. And whenever I'm airbrushing, whichever brush I'm using to spoon my medium in, I use that to test that on my palette. So that is in the same way that I test things if I was dry brushing, I'll test them if I'm airbrushing. And the idea is that I'm going to know from how that behaves on the palette exactly how it should be behaving on my model. So we've got quite a thin mix here. And what we're going to do is hit this model all over. So starting from below, because if anything goes wrong, it doesn't particularly matter there. Coat the entire model, going over that purple sections, and then build it up, going over the blue sections too. Sorry, the white sections too. So we'll hit this model all over, and I'm going to give it 2 thin passes. You don't have to worry about anything here apart from not hitting it with a massively thick coat. So don't worry about kind of precision or anything really like that. That's not what we're going for. We're going for getting something good as fast as possible to get on the tabletop. All right, perfect. Again, I'm always testing this on my palette. So just because you mixed it in the airbrush, it doesn't mean you completely forget the fact that you've got a brush to hand. And now we're going to hit the upper sections of all the same volumes that we hit white. We're going to be repeating with this colour here. So our pressure's quite low on our airbrush, and we're just going to be concentrating on the tops of volumes, really slowing down here in terms of the speed that we're going at, gently. And the fact that we've mixed this with our previous colour should mean that when it lands
it lands fairly subtly. So we'll get all of our model exactly the same places that we hit with the white. Same on the head, we'll just be going from above. And once we've done that, we're nearly done with the airbrushing stages. Check that we can be nice and precise. That's pretty precise, there you go. Don't need more than a 0.4. I'm pretty out of practice because I've just been dry brushing for months as well, so you can get way more precise than that. And then let's make sure we're in focus and on camera here. Just hitting the tops of our sections with a really, really subtle. We're trying to get within our previous layer of airbrushing. This is probably the only step of airbrushing which I'd say is properly precise. And hit our model like that. So again, same areas that we hit the first time round with the white, just smaller and smaller and smaller. So trying to get within that area, within that area, within that area, just like layering if you're using a brush. And we'll do that all over the entire model. And then we're ready to start doing kind of the detailing. So take your time on this step, it's worth doing. Okay, so the next step's a bit of a weird one. We're going to be putting in a couple of contrast paints to the airbrush, Levidon blue and Flesh Tears red. We're mixing these up to get a purple, and then we're going to be aiming that at the lower areas of our models to push the contrast. Okay, so we have our mix here. This looks extremely dark when it comes out the airbrush. I've actually put a little bit of Lamy medium in there, and we're going to be being pretty careful with this. So again, following the principles of hitting it from above and below that we've been kind of using as our guidance from the beginning, I'm going to start from below and just use this to shade any areas. I'm holding the miniature at a really extreme angle. I'm not particularly being very discerning with where it's going because I'm almost hitting it from kind of like a vertically from below. So anything that I hit kind of by definition is something that I want to hit. Apart from maybe a couple of key areas under the knees and stuff like that, so I'll take a little bit more care there. But as it is, we're really trying to push the contrast in terms of like, just these are like underneath the shoulder pads and stuff like that. And then if you wanted to, you could specifically shade areas, that's up to you, it depends what you're comfortable with. I'm just going for something pretty simple here. Not trying to do anything specialist at any point really. Maybe the top of that shield is an exception. There you go, so we've got some contrast there. Alright, so with that done, it's time to move on to the wash, which is ironically going to be made out of pretty much exactly the same mix. I'm using a small here from our Series D set. These are the best dry brushes you will ever use. And really, really taking care to make sure that I've barely got anything on the brush. We've not touched this model with a dry brush yet, therefore this is kind of virgin territory, and you really want to be careful that whatever you do is pretty subtle. So I'm going to start from an area that I'd like to be the brightest, so the very top of the model. Make sure that I'm happy with how it's behaving, and then at that point I'm a little bit happier to take it over the rest of the figure. So now I'm going to be following the principles that we always do with our dry brushing. So if I see a lip, I'm not going down it, I'm going to either side. Oops. Obviously be careful if you've not glued your model together. So I'll go over all of the model like this, hitting all the edges. This is doing our edge highlighting because we're not going to be doing that with a brush. We're trying to get something a little bit faster, so absolutely everywhere on the model. Keep going back to your palette for the paint, and then if you feel like you're caking it a bit too much or you want to be a bit more subtle, go to your dampening pad, make sure that doesn't make your brush too wet, and then you can bring it back to the model and catch up a bit. So we'll go over the entire piece, including the helmet. He's getting the same treatment. We've not got any kind of like specialist areas. He might get brought up to be a shade lighter by the end of this paint job, but he's being treated with exactly the same process that we are the rest of the model. Okay, just to show how precise you can be with this dry brushing, thought I'd show you on this arm. It's going to do all of your edge highlighting for you. And all that really matters is making sure that your brush isn't too wet, too dry, and that you've got the right amount of paint on it. Once you've got those handled and you're confident with them, then you can really kind of, the moment you're aware of that, you can proceed without any caution as far as the model goes. So start gently, we're good. Therefore at this point, you can do whatever we like. Even if it feels like you're not add anything, do hit every single area of the model, because this is laying the foundation that we need to repeat this stage after the wash. So it is really important. It does do quite a lot of work, and what you can gain in terms of edge highlighting, hopefully it's more obvious here on the dark side of this model. It is super efficient. Power armor is amazing for this stuff. Pick out fingers, do whatever you like. Fantastic. Okay, so for this wash, we are actually going to mix up a custom batch, because my previous one ended up so dark. Flesh Terror's red really is a very potent paint. So we've got 1 part Lamy medium in there. We are making this up as we go. Kind of half a part of Leviathan blue. So that's a full part of Leviathan blue. Then I'm going to take the smallest dink Flesh Terrors. There we go. See, that's how strong it is. Just instantly turns your wash to pretty much black. So a bit more blue in there. Okay. Obviously that's not particularly precise. I reckon that is probably 2 parts medium, 1 part Leviathan blue to like a fifth or a quarter of a part of the other. So let's see how dark this looks now. We want something that is going to mainly go in the recesses. Might have to thin that a little bit more. We'll have a see. I am looking to not let this pool anywhere in terms of the raised areas, but still a little bit of water, or yeah, I'd like it slightly thinner than that. Let's take another part of Lamy medium and a dip of water. There we go, that's behaving a little bit more like I need it now. So we're going to be going over the entirety of this model super thin, and the approach that I'm going to take, I'll show you on this section here at least, is to hit an area up, then remove the mix from our brush, or you can have another clean brush that's ready, and then go to the lighter section and push the paint down until it's in a recess. So the idea with that is you put it all over the area, and then you protect the brighter sections by going in with a brush. Like I say, you can have another one ready at every single step, with a little bit of water on it or whatever to push it away. You do that and then push it into the recesses, and we'll do that all over the model. Okay, another close-up just to illustrate this. So take our mix, slosh it quickly around the bottom of the model at the beginning, and then keeping up the speed, going from the top down, ending our strokes towards the bottom. That is the important bit. Now, before it's had time to dry, I'm going to get in there, and any areas that we want to remain particularly bright, you can see that. I'm pushing our paint and I'm ending it somewhere where I'm happy for it to be dark. You can also just straight up mop it up with your brush, and you can push it into areas that you've missed. So if I want to maintain shading around this section, I can go there, and I can place it back on either side of the vent on the top of the helmet, for example. So it's a very organic technique, it's backwards and forwards, it encourages you to work fast, and it complements the dry brushing edge highlighting that we're going to be doing as well. Okay, so very simply now, it is a matter of pretty much exactly repeating our previous stage. The reason that you do this more than once is that the previous stage builds a foundation for this stage, the first stage of dry brushing that we did. So Temple Guard blue, again keeping it soft, again concentrating on the raised or the upward facing areas and the edges, and again testing it elsewhere before we bring it to the model. Quickly pass over the model doing this, and then we're going to move on to the kind of the crisp edging color, which I think we're going to use Blue Horror for. So exactly the same stage again. Make sure that you catch it from the right angle and catch every single one of those edges, because what's the point of power armor if you can't make it crisp? Temple Guard blue is it's great for the scheme that we're going for, but it is a little bit more tropical than you would normally associate with Ultramarines. So pulling something a bit more saturated into the mix should kind of counter that with the final edge highlights that we've got on the model. So again, this is going exactly the same areas, just to a lesser degree, and we're really concentrating on the edges here. So it's super important for us to make sure that everything is being hit from the right angle and with the right amount of paint being not that much at all. I'm mixing it in the same area of the palette. I've used the same brush. I've just given it a little clean between colors, but it's kept some of the Temple Guard blue on the go, and I'm encouraging that. There we go, so we go over the entire model, concentrating on edges like I said, but you can see from the area on the back of the calf or whatever it will be here, the model's looking really, really shiny. Super good results, nice and crisp, and we're not getting a powdery finish or anything like that particularly. So this all over the model. I will show you a close-up on the head just to show you exactly how it works. Okay, so to show you the level of precision we're talking about here, we've just got pure blue horror. I'm working it into my brush carefully, testing how it's going to behave here, and then I will be being quite selective this one. So upwards facing edges, they're being kind of wiped from the side as much as they're being dry brushed. Very careful buffing here, and then the top facing part of that volume, that is being buffed or smushed or whatever phrasing you look to use, and then down below I'll be a bit more selective and also just physically more soft in terms of what I'm doing. So the final stage as far as the armor goes is to use our already pre-made black wash, and I'm just going to go and fill in a couple of details. And by that what I mean is any of these little armor sections that are recessed, and panel lines like this, slightly more carefully than that. I'm going to run a wash into, or a little bit of a glaze, up to you. So areas like this, taking a bit more care than I did with the previous step. Just going to go around and anywhere where there's an opportunity to fill in a detail that can be darker, I will do. So all of the lines, bits like the top of the backpack, just fill them in there, and that's just going to pump up the contrast. So I'll do that all over the entire piece, and then essentially what we've got left is just flat detailing. So eyes, the insignias, I'm going to keep things fairly stark, so it's going to be black, red, or brown, or silver. Okay, so let's try something different here. We've got a plasma gun or whatever it is. So I'm just filling this in, and that's the right word because I'm using fairly wet paint with Ultramarine grey. And the reason for that is that whatever goes here next, I want to be as bright as possible. So it's all going to get filled in fairly carefully. It doesn't matter if you go up to the edges of the space you're in, because you want this to look like it's glowing, but we don't want to overspill them. So as long as you keep it within the recesses, you're good. I'm going to fill that in, and then we can knock it up in terms of brightness. Okay, for our next stage, we've got Fire Dragon Bright. Now I'm basically mixing this up into what you would say is a wash. And I'm going to cheat here, I've got a secret ingredient. So this is fluorescent orange from Vallejo. and Games Workshop don't really have an equivalent of this. I'd really recommend that if you don't have any fluorescent paints, try and get hold of them. They can do some pretty magical stuff, even if it's just highlighting normal colors. They're extremely potent, as you can probably see on my palette. This is next level in terms of brightness. So we're working backwards here, and this is what's going to be in our recesses. We want the recesses to be the brighter section, so filling in what we had there, right up to the edges. Filling is the correct word. Obviously we're not looking to oversaturate it, but we are looking to have something where what's in the recesses is by far the brightest. There we go. That is the most important stage done. So this isn't something to be afraid of. It's a super simple technique, but you can have really, really effective final results. If you didn't have the fluorescent paint, you could just use straight Fire Dragon Bright, maybe add a little bit of yellow in there. Okay, so it's only when you've got a fluorescent on your palette, you see how dull other colors that are normally super bright, so like Fire Dragon Bright and Troll Slayer look on the palette. Just going to take a bit of those, and at this point we do have to be a little bit delicate. We're going to try and follow the filaments. With a little bit of a highlight. Okay, so transitioning to the Troll Slayer orange. Can't believe how dull this looks given what it's next to. And concentrate on the corners, so leaving the Fire Dragon Bright at the edges. So I have a little white scar on my palette. I'm going to make a very wet mix of that. When I say very wet, I mean very wet. Better safe than sorry with this type of stuff. Hopefully you can see how that is on the back of my hand. And just as we did with our first step, I'm putting this in the recesses. Making sure not to miss any. This is your opportunity to catch any bits that were overlooked. Let that dry. We're nearly there. So straight to our pure Fire Dragon Bright. Sorry, Fire Dragon Bright, fluorescent orange. Again, washing it down. And this is going to be glazed over everything. You want it really dilute here. Basically the idea is for this, anything that this is hitting that's had the white on it, it's going to look super bright. Alright, I have stopped detailing for a little bit because I wanted to show you guys exactly how this works. So I've made a mix of Leviathan blue, Abaddon black, and then I've used a little bit of Lamium medium and water, and I've essentially made up my own wash. You could use one of GW's ready-made washes here, but I'm quite liking how this one's working, so I thought I'd show you the application. Just keeping it thin, and with washes on metallics, one of my favourite things to do is give things a first pass, so while the surface is super shiny and metallic, and then just use the same wash a second time. So one of the things people don't realise is that's really important with washes is the surface that you're putting it on makes a massive difference to how it lands. So the first pass, these have got a very, very typical shiny metallic finish, and on the second pass, because they've had a wash on them that's dried, they're going to behave completely differently, and the wash should land and kind of stick a little more readily. So I'm going all over all my metallic sections with that once, and then I'll go all over it again. And one of the nice things about doing washes multiple times like this is because you end up pulling away from edges, again, it's something else that tricks the eyes and kind of looks like an edge highlight. Also, if you missed any areas that you wanted to shade, because of the nature of this wash, it's a pretty perfect one for kind of catching recesses or exaggerating shades or anything like that.
Alright, so given my intro and the video, probably comes as no surprise, I really enjoy painting this guy. I think the secret to enjoying painting is it's all about setting your expectations, and then if you can meet them, you're good. So my expectations for this model were to try and get a really solid result, not like award-winning, but solid, as fast as possible, and I reckon I've done that, and I've done it in a way that should be approachable for anyone watching this video. So apart from painting the details on the Aquila Signa on his chest, there is no delicacy work whatsoever. I just painted inside the lines, there's no fancy highlighting, anything like that. A lot of it is efficiency based. Pretty much every single part of the model was washed with the same type of wash. We got there really quickly and we're still super pleased with the result. So I feel like I've reached that middle ground. You can probably tell because I'm smiling, because it's quite hard to hit. So I think this is a perfect level for being able to sit down and then in an evening doing like 5 of these guys half done, finishing them off the next evening, and then as soon as you know it, you've got a finished army, a couple of vehicles added in, and it would look phenomenal. So please let us know your suggestions for future content. We've got the Indomnitus box, so if you want to see green guys, blue guys, red guys, yellow guys, rusty Necrons, shiny Necrons, metallic Necrons, non-metallic Necrons, let us know below. We will take the feedback on board as we did for this video, and you might see your suggestions coming up in a future video. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the future.